Starting my recording. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Rod Crandall here. Right below me, you've got George Steele. He may be labeled Nathan Berglund. Nathan Berglund is the owner of our company, but that's George, so I know many of you are working directly with George, and we are very pleased to be able to have the opportunity to earn your business. Today, in the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be highlighting our Insurance Advisor Toolbox. You know, this is something that I use certainly every week, sometimes every day. I know George does as well. We do have a number of advisors that utilize this. It's been put together by our team and spearheaded by me a few years ago. And it really was designed to be the spot to have everything that you need to intentionally integrate insurance into your practice. So it's this idea that it's a marketing receptacle. It has all of our best stuff, and I'm going to highlight some of that best stuff for you today, in my opinion. But again, this is designed effectively to have everything that you need to do appropriate business. So if you have heard from us before, you know that what we generally train on is identification and then positioning, right? Because if we can't identify the right kind of client to talk to, then we can't have a conversation, right? So we have to identify the right person, and then we have to position the conversation in the right way. And that's very important to be able to do that, because we're dealing with insurance, and insurance may not be highly palatable for a lot of our clients, especially if we just ask them if they'd like to buy some and we give them a quote. So it's really around having conversations, the right conversations. And what we've found over time is that many wealth advisors here are avoiding these important conversations. And a lot of times it's being avoided because it could be uncomfortable, or maybe they don't feel that they have the knowledge or the expertise to get it done. Maybe they don't want to feel silly. Maybe they just don't want the pain that's involved in the underwriting process. You know, I'd like to tell you that the underwriting process has no pain, but it certainly does. So there is a number of reasons why those conversations aren't being had. But once again, that's what we do here at USAdvisors, is help people have better conversations. And so as you see here, if we look at these tabs, what we have is we've got an identification tab. So how do we find the opportunities? And that's where I'm going to start. Then we move into positioning. So how do we have the conversations? Where are the scripts? And then implementation. If you're ready to take action, how do we take action? So we've shortcutted some ways to do electronic drop tickets, etc. Now, what if you identify somebody, you may or may not feel appropriate positioning them, or maybe you do, but you don't feel appropriate implementing it yourself? Well, now you can introduce a joint work specialist like myself or other people on our team. And then the last tab is the due diligence material. So I'm going to go through what I consider to be the highlights here and show you some tools that, again, a lot of our advisors are using. I want to start with the identification tab. I think that this profiling tool right here is the single most important tool in this toolbox, because it identifies the people that we need to be talking to. Okay, so this is a 3-page document, and I call it the who do you know, right? So in your clientele, who do you know that perhaps needs income protection, right? In the event that they died, and what that might look like. Who are those people that got married or had a child? These are considered qualifying events, right? When these things happen, we need to consider what insurance protection is. It's very vanilla and very basic, but often overlooked, right? Same thing with disability insurance. Certainly young individuals in their 30s and 40s that are building their families aren't always the best investment clients for us, but they often can be very good insurance clients, because they do generally need life insurance and disability insurance. And the reason they really need that is to protect their own ability to earn an income, which is generally going to be their biggest asset. Again, very vanilla. Then we move into, what about utilizing life insurance in retirement planning? This is one of my favorite strategies. The idea that utilizing a specially designed insurance contract that's overfunded at a maximum level can create a supplemental tax-free retirement benefit for our clients. And in fact, the IRS code 7702 that dictates a lot of the rules around how much money can be in these contracts just had a big change in December. And in fact, in next month's coaching call, I'm going to be describing to you what I call the Section 7702 Christmas miracle. The super short story there is the law has changed, and our clients can now put more money than they could before inside of a life insurance contract without it becoming a modified endowment contract. And the net result of that is that we get improved performance. So I've had actual cases that I've worked on where our 20-year performance has improved by 50 basis points. So our internal rate of return improving by 50 basis points because of these new rules. So mark your schedule. I guess that's what, August 19th is our next Coach's Corner. We're going to go deep into that kind of strategy. Permanent insurance contracts can be used for college funding. Many of you are probably aware of that. It does not show up on the FAFSA form, and again is non-countable for taxable income. So if you have clients like this, it should be a flag, in my opinion, for someone that you need to have a conversation with. If you're comfortable having that conversation, you can certainly reach out to them directly. You can reach out to me or George, and we'll kind of walk you through that. By the way, I'm going to give you some scripts and some ideas about how you can approach some of these people. Okay. Qualified plan maximization and non-qualified plan maximization, right? So the idea is a lot of people have qualified plans that like 401ks and the like, IRAs, that they need to take required minimum distributions. They may not need them, they may not want them, and that creates a tax burden, and in fact can create a pretty good tax burden for future generations. Most of you are probably aware that in the Secure Act, they are now requiring for a non-spousal beneficiary of an IRA to take distributions in no longer period of time than 10 years. So if you take myself as an example, if I inherit an IRA, I'm not going to be upset about it, but it's probably the least effective asset that I personally could inherit because I've got to take that at my highest marginal tax bracket, probably want to pay off my house, and if I do that, I'm going to accelerate myself even further, right, on top of my own earned income. And so if you've heard me talk before, you know that I really believe strongly in the word consideration. So I don't believe that everyone needs to buy insurance, and certainly not those that are taking RMDs. They're not required to, but I'd like them to consider doing it because when you structure generally a guaranteed universal life contract for somebody taking RMDs, and you go out 20 years and you calculate the internal rate of return on the premium that was paid in versus the death benefit that is in force in that 30-year period of time, or 20 years in my example, from 70 to 90, you'll end up getting an internal rate of return usually between 3 and 5%. And that's a 3 to 5% return that's guaranteed based on the claims paying ability of the company, non-correlated to the market, and income tax-free to the heirs. By the way, it could be put in an irrevocable life insurance trust as well, which would then remove it from the estate tax calculation. And now I guess is a reasonable time to talk about taxes again. You guys are aware that there's probably 10 to 15 different potential tax levers that they're considering pulling, right? Including marginal tax brackets, corporate taxes, the extension of the Social Security tax, possibly the elimination of the step-up in basis, maybe a reduction in estate taxes. The whole thing there is as taxes go up, the viability of insurance products go up, right? Because when we properly structure these insurance contracts, we don't have to pay taxes on our distributions or our death benefits. And by being able to do that, we save the cost of taxes, and the cost of taxes can be pretty significant, especially for our best clients, and in particular, moving forward. I mean, 20 years from now, I don't know any advisor who believes that on average, taxes are going to be lower 20 years from now than they are today. And so that speaks to how are we setting up our clients with tax diversification. And I know we're funding Roth IRAs when we can. We're doing backdoor Roth IRAs for our best clients, but a lot of times the insurance is missed. So I want to encourage you not to miss that. Okay. Speaks into wealth transfer and legacy planning. You know, if your client has money that they're likely to leave to future generations, they ought to consider the most powerful transfer vehicle around, which is called life insurance, especially second to die structures. I think we're going to see a big resurgence in second to die structures as we get the estate tax settled. My industry contacts tell me that they really believe that that estate tax is going to come back in between maybe $3.5 and $5 million per person. It's up at, I think, 11.6 today. So that's going to affect a lot of people. Should they actually eliminate the step up in basis, I think that would really dramatically hurt a lot of people, especially those that aren't maybe quite as wealthy. You know, you inherit mom's house and it's worth 300,000, but there's a $50,000 basis and we don't get the step up. That could create an issue. Suffice it to say that, you know, utilizing life insurance that shows up at exactly the right time in cash is an asset class that, again, is often overlooked. So you want to consider those people who fit these types of profiles, right? Retirement portfolio protection. Well, this is long-term care insurance. If you've heard me talk about long-term care insurance, you know that I don't really view it as long-term care insurance. I literally view it as retirement portfolio protection. At the end of the day, I happen to believe that if clients get sick and need care, they're going to get the care that they need. And the care that they need is going to cost something. And if it costs something, they're going to pay for it themselves, absent an insurance contract that will transfer some of that risk. So I ask people, what is the effect on your income or your portfolio in the event that you have to double dip because one of you has a long-term care event? And if you're using eMoney or Money Guide Pro, it's really easy to run a what if scenario and show perhaps a 3 or 4 year event for long-term care and stress test that portfolio. Mr. Client, would you like me to stress test your portfolio? Right? When you think about insurance overall, from my point of view, from a very high level, what you have to first ask is there a risk? Right? Is there a risk of dying prematurely, of becoming disabled, of needing long-term care, right? If a client says, no, there's no risk, that's not a risk to me, there's really going to be no opportunity to have a meaningful discussion. But most reasonable clients will say, yeah, there's a risk. I don't want to buy the insurance. Go, okay, that's good. I understand that. So if there's a risk, then what we have to do is we have to determine how big is that risk and how do we feel about it. So that's what I mean about stress testing the portfolio. So let's look, how big is this risk? How do you feel about that, right? And at the end of the day, clients really only have two options with regard to a risk they identified. I have a risk, I don't like it, but I don't really want to pay for insurance. Okay, well, you have two options. You can effectively keep your risk yourself and keep your money, or you can transfer some of your money to an insurance company to transfer some of the risk. And I think when you get into that kind of conversation, what you find is that people don't want to accept that risk, especially for long-term care. It's my opinion that long-term care is the most important planning item that we're dealing with. I really do believe that. You know, most of our clients are not going to die prematurely with their kids still in their home. Doesn't mean we shouldn't insure them. I think we should, and we do. But the vast majority are not going to pass away early. But you know what? Depending what statistic you're looking at, you might have a half of the people to more that are going to need some sort of long-term care, and we know what the costs are, right? I was just looking up in Minnesota the other day for actual costs in the Twin Cities, and I was really shocked that the cost in the Twin Cities, the median cost for a nursing home was $12,000 a month. And I was shocked that that was so high, especially relative to Chicago, where I am. That cost was around $8,500 a month. That's in a private nursing home, right? $12,000 per month. Check out what it is in your area. Genworth still, although they're not selling new policies, they still have a nice cost of care survey out there. Genworth cost of care survey, I think the last one they did was 2020, which is where I pulled that from. If you haven't looked at that, you can pull that up and you can just Google it and pull it up, and you can search your area and it will tell you what that exact cost is in that area. And if you haven't seen that or had any experience with it, it's pretty shocking how expensive that can be. I know I had a friend who used to run a nursing home in Crystal Lake, Illinois. This was about 6 or 7 years ago. And he indicated that at that time he had a woman that was in the Alzheimer's unit there for over 10 years at over $10,000 per month. So I'm not a scare tactic person, but you start asking clients if they've had any experience from this, and you'd be surprised a lot of them have, and they've dealt with their parents or their grandparents. And if that's the case, they're often very open to this kind of conversation. So keep that in mind. Business owners, I think that's really underserved as business owners, especially in the wealth advisor space. I think what I see is that oftentimes wealth advisors aren't tremendous investment clients unless you're managing the 401k or the retirement account, because a lot of times the money's still in the business. But again, they're really good insurance clients because they have multiple needs, including fulfilling buy-sell agreements. You know, do you have a buy-sell agreement, and is it funded? Is it funded with life insurance and long-term and disability, maybe even long-term care? Right? Key person coverage. Is there any individuals here that we want to retain or reward? Okay, I was just talking with a friend of mine who runs a very successful pizza franchise. Now it's a small franchise. There's 3 different locations, and it's local to me. And they fared very well during COVID, very much so. And they retained a lot of their staff, mostly because it was pizza. I think why they did so good, and they're really good pizza. But now what he's telling me is that there's a local bigger chain that's also a local chain that is going after his managers. And he's literally offering his managers 50% more compensation if they'll leave the pizza firm and go to the other firm. 50% more. And so we're currently talking about whether or not it makes sense to put together some sort of non-qualified deferred compensation or golden handcuffs for these individuals, key person coverage to get these people to stay and not to leave. And so conceptually what that might look like was, well, if you'll stay with me for 5 years, maybe I'll give you $10,000 a year for 5 years, something like that, right? So just keep in mind that business owners can be a very good prospects for insurance planning for the reasons I'm describing. And also, all things being equal, it's easier to get a check from the business than it is to get a check from the individual. And so there's a lot of opportunities there, especially business owners then that have large amount of reserves or have bonding requirements and have to sit on cash. So if you have any business owners that sit on cash, they're getting pretty hurt with cash returns. And so there's specially designed contracts called corporate owned life insurance contracts that are fundamentally much better than, quote, retail products, in the sense that you can have positive cash value in year 1 in a lot of these structures. So you can have business owners take money from the corporate checkbook in their left pocket, put it in their right pocket inside of an insurance contract that's specially designed to uphold a high cash value in the very first year. And by the way, it'll provide insurance protection for likely the proprietor or maybe a key person. And so there's a lot of interesting things that can be done with business planning, again, for both owners and non-owners, right? Here's that golden handcuff scenario that I'm describing here. Okay. If you have any relationships with banks or credit unions, there's a big opportunity, again, to utilize us to potentially help them enhance, grow, or implement a bank-owned or credit union-owned life insurance contract. You see, these are, again, similar to the corporate-owned. This is designed to be balance sheet neutral. So a vast majority of banks, I think at last count it was around 70% of banks, have a bank-owned life insurance portfolio. And they might have $5 million, $10 million, or $50 million literally in insurance contracts on one or more of the executives on the bank. And they do that because they have to sit on earnings at low interest rate, and by utilizing these specially designed contracts, we can generally enhance the yield. We can remove any term insurance costs that they may be already paying for the key person coverage they may already have in place. And again, it shows up without a charge to earnings. That's completely fundamentally different than the whole life contract you're used to seeing that takes 10 years before we have a return on our cash value, or the IUL contract that you're used to seeing that it takes 6 years to create a net cash value. These types of contracts have that net cash value in year 1. In the bank space, that's a net yield today of maybe 2.5% net of the cost of insurance. So they can be very interesting cases, and they pay us really well as well. Then lastly, we have this Preserving Rural America program, right? So this is really an estate planning wrapper. What ends up happening is in rural America, right, which many of you are in, what you end up having is you have a lot of wealth that is in the dirt, right? It's in the land. And to the extent that we owe taxes on any form or fashion, especially estate taxes, now we're talking about where's our liquidity going to come from to pay this tax. We don't want to have to sell acres to pay the taxes, right? And by the way, maybe we have a ranch and we have one daughter that's running the ranch, and maybe we have a son who isn't, who's out somewhere else. Well, how do we effectively treat that other son equitably if the majority of the wealth is inside of the ranch or in the farm? So there's a lot of unique planning opportunities that exist inside that space as well. So what I want you guys to see is that was what? I highlighted something like 8 different opportunities. So when you think about who do you have that needs to be talked to, I want you to think of this sheet. Call me or George and let's talk about them, right? So let's go back here into the Identify. So we're back in the Identify tab. That was our profiling tool. I want to show you this. This is a where is your assets? And it sort of supports what I have just been describing around an asset class, right? A lot of people are looking at insurance just as a cost. And it is an asset class that is very palatable. By the way, this is approved at Securities America. So you guys can use this piece. We wanted it to say tax now, tax later, tax never, and that did not make it through compliance. What did make it through compliance was tax advantaged, right? And so what's interesting here is it's a conversation piece. You know, you're looking at all your assets, you're doing great. Where are they? What assets are sitting here in tax now? What's in tax later? And what's in tax advantaged? I think what you'll see and what you'll understand pretty simply is most people have most of their money right here in tax later. And that's good. You know, tax later feels great. I get a tax deduction today, which is beautiful. I get tax deferral for 20 or 30 or 40 years, which is beautiful. And then what? Oh, I have to pay the piper. It's going to come out fully taxable later. So it's not that things shouldn't be in this column. They should be. But should all of my money be in this column? I don't think so. What if taxes are higher in the future than they are today? Should money really be in this bucket? So this is interesting. I don't believe people should stop funding this bucket. I do not believe that. I've never recommended that. I think they absolutely should. But I do believe a lot of people are putting money in this bucket that shouldn't be in this bucket. It should be in the tax advantaged bucket. Okay? And I know some of you believe that because you're doing backdoor Roth conversions. Well, backdoor Roth conversions are what? Oh, we're better off in this bucket than we are in this bucket. Okay. Of course, utilizing tax advantage bucket is more painful today, right? Because I have to recognize that tax. Okay. So you heard me earlier say that my favorite word is consideration, and that's true. Well, maybe it's true because my other favorite word is and. I am a big fan of the word and I believe clients need some tax now and some tax later and some tax advantage. By the way, I believe the Roth IRA is probably the best vehicle on earth, second to an HSA. I think an HSA is better, right? I can put the money in a pre-tax basis. I can grow tax deferred. I can get it out tax-free if I'm over 60. But there's very limited there, right? We have clients that are funding insurance contracts with $50,000 a year, $80,000 a year, $100,000 a year. In the past, I've had clients funding $1 million a year. Clients don't put that kind of money in insurance contracts because they think insurance companies and agents are great. Okay, they put it there because they know what it does, right? It's not what the insurance is, it's what the insurance does. And when you're utilizing insurance for accumulation purposes and you're doing it right, you can get the cost of insurance down to 1% or less annually. And if I can get the cost drag down to 1% or less annually, and it's a tax-free distribution, then I'm in a beautiful spot because for my best clients, that 1% drag is going to be less than the drag on taxes. So this is a 2-page document. The second page is actually a fillable form. Okay, so we're talking about where are our buckets, but let's see. Let's just put it down. Where are these? This could be a fact finding. I would use this with a brand new client as well, right? You may not need to fill this out with an existing client, especially if you have a financial plan. But again, you can talk through it. But this is a nice piece. And again, it is compliance approved at Securities America. If any of you have any questions, by the way, you can just unmute yourself and just come right on for me, okay? But I'm going to walk through there. So again, we're in the identification, easy for you to say, the identification tab. There's my profiling tool. Where's my assets? You can see there's a bunch of other things in here. We don't have time to go through each and every one of them. But I do want you to understand we do have a marketing library. And inside that marketing library, we have a number of videos, primarily of me doing coaching calls like this or other trainings. This particular video, how to leverage centers of influence, has probably been viewed more than any of the other videos in here. This is just my personal methodology to leverage, manage, and maintain centers of influence. And so I literally have a whole process of how we select those people, how we meet with them, how we serve them, how we need to make sure we're giving to them, not just taking from them, how we want to be able to share revenue in some form or fashion if we can. And again, for whatever it's worth, that has gotten probably more views than anything else. Okay. Other presentations, again, from me, the Chief Integration Officer, right? So there's a lot of info in here and more than you could ever use. I think functionally, what we would do is if you wanted to use this better, we would understand what are you going after and what do you need? And we can sort of curate, George and I can curate sort of a plan of what of these things ought you be using. In fact, a couple of years ago when we onboarded George, a key component in his training with us was consuming material in this toolbox. So he would systematically go in and consume material over time as a training program, which again, this is all about everything you'll ever need to integrate into your practice. Okay? So I'm going to move past the identification into the positioning tab. So this positioning tab is all about what do we say, right? And so I heard a guy, Charlie Gipple, some of you might know him. Charlie Gipple is a friend of mine. He's actually a competitor, and he's a very good guy. And he says it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And he shares a story that just cracks me up. He goes, what if I went to my wife and I said, I forget his wife's name. We're going to call her Penny. I said, Penny, your face could stop a clock. He said, instead of saying, hey, Penny, time stands still when I'm with you, right? Completely different thing. Words do matter. So it does matter what you say. You don't want any of that insurance stuff, do you? Hey, you want to pay $10,000 a premium for that long-term care? You know what you should do? You should give me $80,000 to buy that insurance contract. You see, those things just aren't going to work. What we say is very important. So I have a life insurance review script here. I want to show you briefly. Okay, so this comes up in a Word document. By the way, I didn't mention that this toolbox is an interactive PDF document. So really what it is it's kind of a shell. And anytime you click on a link, then you go into that link on our SharePoint drive. So we basically have all this information sitting up in a cloud, which means that we can continue to update that cloud and we continue to do that, by the way, like these videos get housed in our toolbox. And so the point is that this one document can be emailed to you. It is almost no room. It's not a huge document. You know, if we send you 5 or 6 PDFs, sometimes your system rejects it because they're too big. Well, here we've got everything in one spot and it's just pulling it from the cloud. Okay. So here's an example of a call script. I believe strongly in the idea that you could take what you like and drop what you don't. I'm not going to pretend this is the best script ever, but I'm going to tell you it's worked for me and it's worked for a lot of my advisors. You know, and why I put together this script was advisors were asking me, hey, Rod, I understand, and you had me identify some of these people, and I got 3 people to call, but I feel like really weird calling them because they've been clients of mine for 11 years, and I haven't brought up insurance to them. So how can I possibly go to them now, right? And so I said, well, here's what I would say. I was thinking about you recently. Hey, that's good. I think people like to be thought of. Oh, you were thinking of me? Why is that? Well, in light of recent economic conditions and a rising tax environment, we're being more proactive with our clients than we have in the past. Right? So this tells me I'm thinking about you because there's something timely going on. Okay. And because of which we're doing something we didn't do before where we're proactively reaching out to you. So this gives, I think, the advisor permission that they haven't talked about insurance in 11 years. It also heightens the importance of why I want to talk to you. There's something going on, right? There's something going on. For someone like you, taxes can often be your single biggest expense, and taxes may be going up, right? So we have some unique planning opportunities unique planning opportunities, right? I think words matter, and I think these are good words. Would you be open to coming in? Do you have your calendar handy? So again, take what you like and drop what you don't. What you're going to see if you start asking people is you are going to get objections. Okay, you will. Already have insurance in force. That is great news. It's great news. Okay, we'd be happy to review your policies and give you a second opinion. Right? Would that be valuable to you? Okay. Sometimes I might ask them, can you give me an idea of what you have? You know, if you ask them, can you give them an idea? Can you give me an idea of what you have? The answer usually is not really, kind of, a little bit. Okay, well, let's review it. So they don't know what they have. When they say we already have it in force, they're really saying, I don't want to talk about insurance. And you say, I understand that. I don't want to talk about what insurance is either. I want to talk about what it can do for you, and most importantly, what it means to your financial plan, right? That's the key. Already working with another person. That is excellent. I'm glad that you've already addressed this. What can you tell me about your existing plan? Not very much. When was the last time your existing plan was reviewed? Can't remember. Well, perhaps it would be beneficial for us to take a second look. Are you open to that? Right? We're all set. We don't need any insurance. Well, that might be true. But in light of what's going on, you might want to be aware of some of the things that we're paying attention to. Right? The stronger your relationship is with the client, the less likely they're going to give you any of these objections, right? If you think it's important to have a conversation, if my advisor calls me and says, Rod, you need to get in here because we need to have a conversation. You know what I'm going to say? Okay, let's get our calendar, right? Because I trust my advisor. And if he thinks I need to have a conversation, then I want to hear what he has to say. Okay? So that just gives you an idea of one script that we have. Okay, we have a life insurance discovery meeting script too, like if we're trying to determine the need for insurance. Okay, so again, in our time today, I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time. But what we have here is I usually ask, how do you feel about life insurance in general, and what would you want to have accomplished? Right? I want to understand how people feel. Philip Simonson is an old, he's not old, he's just an old mentor of mine. And he always says that you have to touch the heart before you touch the mind. And I think that's true generally speaking, but it's very, very true in insurance. And if you can't get to how somebody feels, it's going to be very difficult for you to implement insurance. So not only do we want to get to how they feel, but we want them to effectively expose themselves. And I don't mean that to be negative, but I want them to state, like, what do they know and how do they feel? Because I want to know what their knowledge level is, and generally their knowledge level is low. And so they're going to admit that up front, which means that when I come in as the authority, they're going to accept that more readily because they already admitted to me that they don't really know. And that's very important. Okay. More important than that is that I need to know what their goals are, because if I'm going to make a recommendation, I want to show them how the insurance supports their goals, which is what the insurance does. It's not what the insurance is. If you put this insurance in place, it's going to support your goals, what you told me before, right? And by the way, if they say, yeah, but I don't want to implement this, then we also can say, okay, well, can we go back to your goals? Has something changed? Because I believe that you told me that X, Y, and Z was important to you, right? So you shouldn't just jump right into here's insurance quotes, right? So I generally ask, how do they feel? Then I usually let people know that it's not really life insurance usually that's needed, it's an income, right? When you tell clients they need $1 million of life insurance, they get a little confused. $1 million is a lot, right? Well, it is, but you don't even need the life insurance. What you need is the $1 million to produce a $40,000 income, right? That's what we need. The only reason you need life insurance is we don't have the $1 million of capital to produce the $40,000 of income. Put another way, if I go to the boat, I'm close to Elgin, Illinois. 20 minutes from now, I can be on a gambling boat. Okay. And if I walk into that gambling boat and I win $1 million, this is the single best day of my entire life by far. I was gambling and I make $1 million. It's a windfall profit to me. This is the best thing ever. But that same $1 million paid to my wife because I'm died today, and my wife just gets $1 million and that's it. She never gets my income ever, ever, ever again. That $1 million is not very much, and it does not replace my future earning capacity, and candidly, not even close, right? And so what's happening is a lot of our clients are not protecting their own money machine, their biggest asset, right? I've started working with some people in their 30s that have like really high paying tech jobs in Madison, Wisconsin. And so you get someone who's 30 years old and they're making $200,000 a year, and they have a spouse, and the spouse is earning $200,000 a year, and they're 30 years old. So they're going to work for 30 more years at $200,000 a year and growing. They're making $6 million before they ever get any increases or any promotions. That's a pretty big asset. Okay. If we had a money machine in our garage, an ATM that was throwing off this kind of money, we wouldn't be talking about whether or not we would be insuring that machine. We would absolutely be insuring that machine. But meanwhile, LIMRA does study after study, and they make phone calls, and something like 50% of the population admits that they're underinsured for life insurance, but they don't buy it. They know they're underinsured, but they don't buy it. Why? Don't want to talk to an insurance guy, don't want to put insurance in place, it's too expensive. They need their advisor to have a good conversation with them, right? So I want to know how they feel about it. Then I want to reframe for them that it's not really insurance that they need, it's an income. Even in the long-term care side, right? We're protecting the retirement portfolio with long-term care. We're protecting the individual's ability to earn a living with life insurance, right? And then you can see that now we drill into how much income would you want. That's how I generally do it, because clients understand income. So let's get the income number. We'll back into effectively the present value lump sum that's required to produce that type of income. Okay. So once again, take what you like, drop what you don't, but want you to be aware that these things do exist inside of here. So I also want to show you this long-term care engaged planning conversation. And where is it? Did I have it right? Here it is. Have an engaged planning conversation. Okay. So this is basically walking through a long-term care planning conversation. Now, again, as I described to you, it's not about long-term care, it's about having a plan and about protecting the retirement portfolio. So this is a really good sheet that just makes sense to sort of walk through that kind of conversation. The first is, what is the risk? If you live to 80, 85, or 90, is it reasonable to think that you might need some sort of assistance? I mean, if you think about it, long-term care is the polar opposite of life insurance. Life insurance protecting us if we die too young. Long-term care protecting us if we live too long. And by the way, the older we get, the higher likelihood exists that we need help living. Things that used to kill us aren't killing us, right? So what risk are we dealing with? It's not just the risk, it's the consequences of that risk, right? So what are the consequences? You have personal and financial consequences. Okay, I've seen some people, including those in my family, needing long-term care or even dying prematurely like my mother did. And what I find is that when a death or a disability occurs, we have an emotional catastrophe. So you got personal consequences. Dad's sick, mom's sick. Emotionally, it's bad. I call it a catastrophe. So we have an emotional catastrophe. And if our math isn't right, if we don't have the appropriate protection, then we effectively have an emotional catastrophe and a mathematical catastrophe at exactly the same time. And that's kind of like putting a magnifying glass in the sun and putting it on your yard and just watching your yard go up in flames. Right? And so I want to talk to clients about what that risk looks like. And have you ever seen that? And how do you feel about that? And we don't need to buy any insurance, but we sure need to create a plan. And a great plan is a plan that allows you to stay in your home. That same cost of care survey in 2020 indicated that something like 70% of all LTC events start in the home, right? People say, I don't want to go into a nursing home. Well, good, I don't either. I believe that you don't voluntarily go into a nursing home. You go into a nursing home because you've sort of run out of options. Virtually every long-term care structure we have in place allows you to stay at home. I would prefer to be at home, and I think many of our clients would be. Let's make sure we have a plan that allows for that. Let's make sure that the plan protects the emotional and physical well-being of your family. And it also protects all the financial commitments. right? If I'm sick and I need $8,000 a month for my care, but my goal was that my wife and I could live on $8,000 a month to maintain our living, I still want her to be able to maintain her standard of living. And it's going to be big time challenged because I'm sick and she's going to want to take care of me. She's going to feel badly going on vacation without me, perhaps. And then we may not have the cost, right? So that's the thing. It's tough conversations. I've heard a different mentor of mine call it a courageous conversation. A lot of times you do have to have some courage to have these kind of conversations. But that's why I believe that these conversations should be had with the wealth advisor. The single most important thing is that financial plan. That financial plan is everything. And if you're doing a great job with that plan and you're showing the clients that they're in the green, all you have to do is ask them, should we stress test this plan? Well, what do you mean? Well, this plan assumes that your money machine doesn't ever break, right? And so what if it did? What would that look like? Do you want to have a conversation? And then we're into this, okay? So if we have a plan, we have to figure out who's going to pay for the plan. Well, at the end of the day, Medicare is health insurance, so that's not going to pay for the plan. Medicaid could pay for the plan, but we have to effectively spend down the majority of our assets and maybe create a spousal impoverishment scenario. Most of our clients aren't going to be going on Medicaid, or certainly don't want to go on Medicaid. We can self-insure. Well, some of our clients can self-insure. And even you'd run that stress test and you go, yeah, even if you had a 4-year event at $10,000 a month, your plan still runs. Well, isn't that wonderful? They don't have to buy insurance. But I will tell you that them paying for their own care out of pocket is still the least effective way to do it. They're going to pay full retail price at exactly the time they need it, and they probably have to advance it from a taxable account. So the long-term care structures we have do not create a taxable event. They're either paid out to you in cash because there may be an advancement of a death benefit, or they're paid directly to the care provider in a reimbursement basis, in either event, non-taxable. So we don't have to have the insurance, but we need to understand it and we need to consider it, right? And so if Medicare pays for the health insurance and we have to be basically impoverished to get on the Medicaid program, and self-insuring is the least effective way to pay for it, then that just leaves long-term care insurance. Okay, now, most of our advisors don't insure all the risk. I think they insure, in my opinion, a third to a half of the risk. And that makes sense. And you find that sweet spot. What I find is if you have really good conversations around this, clients want Cadillac plans, but once you show them what Cadillac plans cost, they buy a lot of Buicks, right? And at the end of the day, what ends up happening often is budget dictates how much we can transfer to the insurance company. And that makes sense because in the financial plan, if we're going to run that stress test for the 4-year event and we're going to suggest that we buy insurance, then we have to build in the insurance premiums into the retirement timeline, right? But again, it gives us the right context to have the right conversation with clients. Then it goes into the overview. How do we qualify? Well, you need either activities of daily living or a cognitive impairment, get you into the benefits. The main moving parts, there's 4 main moving parts: the monthly benefit, the duration of benefits, the cost of living adjustment, and a waiting period. So these are what determines how much risk we can transfer. The different ways that claims are paid, there's that reimbursement versus cash indemnity that I alluded to just a moment ago. And then the 4 most common long-term care plans. I can tell you that most clients believe that only this plan exists, traditional long-term care. I call it the use it or lose it pay-as-you-go plan. Well, there's a lot more out there. You got life insurance and long-term care combination plans on a pay-as-you-go basis. We've got these plans on a lump sum and short pay basis, maybe 1 to 10 years funding. There's certainly life insurance only, which isn't long-term care, as you can imagine, but can serve as a replenishment vehicle, perhaps. Where we'll use that a lot is if you have a husband who's maybe 10 years older than a wife, and women outlive men 5 to 7 years. And so now for planning purposes, the wife might live 15 years longer than the gentleman, plus women need long-term care at a higher clip. So if we insure the gentleman there with life insurance, presumably death benefit's going to be paid income tax-free to her 15 years before her death, by the way, which means if she needs long-term care, it might be in that 12, 13, 14, 15-year range. And so it can be a funding vehicle, even though it isn't specifically long-term care coverage. And by the way, there's second to die structures in this space that I like a lot. I got George burning up illustrations for me over and over with One America. that has a second to die structure, which puts two people on one policy and then allows long-term care advancement. And there's a number of different designs there, and it actually can accommodate qualified money as well. So keep in mind, we can use second to die structures with qualified money, and that can be very unique because a lot of times our clients want to pay for this, but the biggest money they have is in that qualified tax later bucket. And we can take $100,000 out of that for a nice round number and do something very meaningful for them. So keep that in mind. So then at the end of the day, this talk track, if you will, says that, hey, if this is how we qualify, and these are the different designs that I'm going to come back, the next steps are, at the end of the day, as I mentioned, you have two choices. You can keep your money or you can transfer the money. And so let's get together and pull together some numbers so that you can see what this means for you and ideally what it means for the financial plan in particular. So I wanted to share that with you. I think this one is very good. So hopefully you see some value in that. All right, so let's move to the implement tab. Now, by the way, a lot of good stuff. This historical tax chart, you should check that out. We've had tax brackets in the 70 and 90% range in the past. Okay, 70 and 90, and we've been in the 50s. We're in a very low tax bracket right now, tax environment, I should say, relatively speaking. So we're 146, so we still got about 10 more minutes here. So the implement tab. So what we have here is how do we process business? So we do have a mobile app that can be used. So I know not a lot of our advisors are using this. I think mostly because our advisors are generally a little bit older, but we do have an app available. We do have a field underwriting guide, which is very important. So this underwriting guide is 117 pages. So you don't want to just read from beginning to end. But here's the thing is that this underwriting guide has all of these health questionnaires. So if you have a client that has some sort of health concern, we probably have a specific questionnaire for that so that we can pre-screen the health concern. Right? We're brokers. We work with over 50 companies. We have access to an in-house underwriter that helps us determine insurability. Most carriers have what's called a quick quote process, which allows us to go confidentially to the carriers, say I've got a guy or I've got a gal and here's what we're dealing with. And so this is a very nice tool to capture that information. We have an electronic application process. Okay, so e-tickets with American General, American National, Banner, Cincinnati, Lincoln, Minnesota, Mutual of Omaha, North American, Principal, Protective. So at the end of the day, you're ready to take action. If you haven't written insurance in some time, you might remember that you used to have to take 30-page applications. By and large, we do not have to do that any longer. Almost everyone has a 1 to 7-page application electronically. Okay, and so the bane of my personal existence is underwriting, right? Once we get a yes from the client, then we're into underwriting, and that can be clunky dealing with insurance companies, but they're getting a lot better, and electronic processes make it a lot easier. We don't have to use paper. We don't have to even see our client in person oftentimes, and especially now with Zoom, we can complete these things right on a screen share with them. So it can be very efficient. So on that implementation tab, again, we do have quote request forms for long-term care, disability, and life insurance. We don't require them, but we certainly have them. John Hancock has a really great microsite that you should check out here. I'm not going to go into it today. I don't have the time, but it has a lot of great calculators and analysis in here. This is one of the best carrier microsites, which is why we decided to go ahead and put that on this screen. So pay attention to that. Now, we alluded to the idea of doing joint work, and many of you, or hopefully all of you, know that I'm available personally for joint work. I do joint work on a 40% split generally, depending upon what we agree on. But generally, we'll leave you with a bigger split than me, but I can be your partner, and we can effectively come in together, and I can drive everything, including the underwriting process with our team, and keep you in the loop should you want that, right? Certainly, George is available. I know many of you are working with George. If you're dealing with disability insurance, Mitch does a really, really great job on that basis. Andrew is also in our office and available. When we deal with corporate-owned and bank-owned life insurance and non-qualified deferred comp and sort of more advanced type cases, we often use Dave Sosik at National Benefits Group, and he's just really good. A lot of times if you're dealing with advanced market people, you might find what I found in the past is that they're sometimes almost too smart for their own good. Like they're so smart that they don't present that well a lot of times because maybe they don't speak that well, or certainly speak down to the level of the prospects. Dave is not like that. He is super smart, but he is very, very well spoken, and that's really why I like working with him. So if we move to our due diligence tab, we've got our website here and our contact list, our carrier list, so you can get a sense of what we're doing. Here's the carrier list, right? So we've got life insurance, long-term care, disability insurance, asset-based long-term care, annuity, and variable life insurance. So you will not lose a case based on competition. We may not have every carrier, but we definitely have all of the big carriers, and we're very, very competitive on that basis. Some of you may know that we do work with some partners. I've mentioned National Benefits Group, so our strategic partners. So they do our advanced planning, COLI and BOLI, non-qualified deferred comp. We have Newman Long-Term Care. They're our back office for traditional long-term care. They're one of the leaders in that space, and so we get very good service from them as well. And then Secura Consultants, that was where Mitch came from here. And Secura is our disability insurance specialists. And they do a fantastic job. If you're trying to quote life insurance from George will usually get a quote out to you in an hour to 24 hours maximum, right? If you're getting a disability quote, it takes a few days because they're doing sort of preliminary underwriting. And Secura does a great job of bringing in multiple disability contracts, putting together beautiful summaries about the pros and cons, and actually making a recommendation. So they do a very high level concierge service for us as well. You can certainly talk to them directly, but like all things, you should go through George or myself so that we can get you pointed in the right direction. Okay. And then you can check out our website, right? And so if you haven't already been on our website, that's here, and you can log in, of course, and request a login so that you can get into that information here. Okay, so I'm actually using a different browser for this than I normally do, because normally my stuff would just come up, but I'm using a browser that I only use on these Zoom meetings. But get on our website and request a login so that you have access there. And I guess that's about everything formal. Hey, George, is there anything in this toolbox that you think that I should show them while we're in it?
Well, I think just to point out again that it comes in many formats, like today's library, CD, video, of course, the white papers and forms, pre-fill forms included. Yep. All those things are valuable, but I also wouldn't, because it is such a vast library, I don't want the presentation to infer that we're not here to help guide you into it, help you select. I certainly have my favorites pre-pulled on certain topics. Yep. And beyond that, I truly believe the financial advisor is the quarterback. There are other consultants out there and general insurance agents and so on, but really the broadest view, I think, of a household comes through a financial advisor, and we're just trying to equip your game plan that little bit more. And even the best quarterbacks I've observed on TV sometimes refer to a little cheat sheet, if you will, on their wrist or whatever. This isn't a memory exercise. It's just pulling together the best and most customized information for your client. And so I hope that's the way this vast amount of material is viewed. It's a assemblage, and it's something we can really help you along with as well.
Yeah, but it's just a tool, and those are great comments. I mean, like any tool, it needs to be put to use, and the best way to put it to use is to create a structure, right? If I was building a shed in the backyard, I'd need to know what the scope of that looked like and what tools I might need. And so I would say that same thing here, which is what I alluded to before. We can custom design sort of an implementation plan for you. If you want to be intentionally integrating insurance in your practice, which is really what we do, we'll go, well, which clients are you dealing with? What kind of conversations do you want to have? And we can put together a nice program and assemble the right tools and even the right team to the extent that you need some point of assistance help. So coming up next, I alluded to the idea that in August, our next Coach's Corner is August 19th. We're going to talk about the Section 7702 Christmas Miracle. I haven't been as excited about an insurance change, maybe ever, than this one. And again, the sneak peek there is that results are improved for clients because cost of insurance is driven down because we can put more money in a contract than we could before. Hopefully you guys are reading the Always Be Learning emails that are going out on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. Those are sent out by Jeff to you guys, but I draft those up. Hopefully you're getting something out of that. You can certainly please reach out to George or myself. Here is George's contact information here. Again, I know he's your main point of contact for most of you. And then here's my contact information as well. And so with that, we're 156. I guess I'll make one more call out for any questions. Is there anybody out there that have any questions or comments about this or anything else? Okay, so then Nancy, do I see that you have a question? Maybe not. Okay, so with that, I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you intend to serve your clients and drive some revenue. Brett, have a wonderful day, will you?
Thanks, Rod. Thanks, George.
All right, take care, you guys. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
All right, bye-bye now.